Hello everyone. Today we're joined with myself, which is Naomi, and I'm joined with my colleague Jackie, who will be manning the chat system. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in there as your mics and camera will be disabled for today's webinar. But in today's webinar, we'll be exploring how you can support your child with anxiety and worries. So just go over some ground rules. Like I've just mentioned, the cameras and microphones are going to be disabled. We do have a Q&A function available and that will be monitored throughout. So please pop any questions that you have in there and they'll be answered. Alternatively, if you do have any questions or queries following today's session, there's an email there that you can pop an email to and ask any further on. So I'll just pause there, just if you did want to jot down that email. So it's at risenortheast@childrensociety.org.uk. So first things first, we'll go on who are RISE, because you may not be aware of our team. We are a mental health support team, which is funded by the NHS and Department for Education. We're made up of education mental health practitioners and children wellbeing practitioners, which are trained in low intensity cognitive behavioural therapy. We work in schools across Newcastle and Gateshead and work with children and young people from the ages of 5 years old all the way up to 18 years. And like I said, we're trained to assess and support children and young people with mild to moderate mental health difficulties, including anxiety, low mood, low self-esteem, those sorts of things. In today's webinar, we've got quite a lot to get through, but we'll be looking at identifying anxiety in your young person. We'll be looking at stress and the brain, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, what can keep anxiety going, how you might want to reframe reassurance and encourage your child or young person to face their fears, and then just look at some top tips for supporting young people to overcome their anxiety. So first things first, when can anxiety be helpful? So anxiety can actually be helpful. It's our body's natural alarm system. It's designed to keep us safe by alerting us to possible danger and preparing us to respond. So a certain amount of anxiety is completely normal and even useful in helping children and young people to stay focused. For example, if they've got a test coming up or if they're getting them to pay attention when crossing a busy road. So that's just some examples on when anxiety can be helpful. Now, the aim of this is not to suggest that we can get rid of anxiety completely, because it is a normal response. But the purpose of today is just to give you some tips and strategies on how you can support your children and young people to understand their emotions, to understand why they might be feeling anxious and how to respond in a way that's more helpful. So anxiety can become a problem, and that's when it starts to get in the way of everyday life. For example, when it lasts a long time, it might make your child feel physically unwell, or it stops them from doing the things that they'd want to do. Now, it's important to remember that every child is different. So something that can feel small to one child can feel huge to another. And that's not to say kind of one child's wrong for and the other one is. But if you are concerned about your child's anxiety and whether that can be a problem, it might be worth asking yourself, is the anxiety stopping them from doing what they want to or should be doing? Specifically asking, is it affecting their social life, such as is it causing problems with friendships, or are they avoiding social situations or pulling out of clubs? You can also ask yourself, is it affecting them academically? So is it stopping them from doing as well as they could be? Are you noticing that they're struggling to concentrate, or having teachers mention they're struggling to concentrate? Or even are they struggling to attend school completely? And then finally asking yourself, is it affecting their mood? So are you noticing that they're being a little bit more agitated than usual? Are they noticing them being low? So asking yourself that question can give you an indication on whether or not your child's anxiety is becoming a problem. Now, we know that anxiety can look different from child to child, and while all anxiety involves feeling worried or frightened, the focus of those worries can vary. Now, you can probably see on the screen there, we've got different types of anxiety. First, we've got generalized anxiety. So that's where they tend to worry about lots of different areas, such as health, the future, the environment. They can't seem to just focus on worry, like one worry at a time. And you might notice they have a lot of what if worries. Then we've got social anxiety. So social anxiety is different to kind of a child being shy. It's worries about those interactions and conversations with others. It's that worry surrounding other people's perceptions of themselves or fear of judgment and embarrassment, which can often lead to them feeling very self-conscious and focusing that on themselves. So they might have a lot of worries of, I will do something stupid and everybody will laugh at me. I'm going red and everyone can say I look weird. And that's even when there's no evidence to suggest this. And thirdly, we've got separation anxiety, which is that intense physical symptoms, anxieties or worries when separated from a primary caregiver. So their worries tend to focus around something bad happening to themselves or to their caregiver when they're not with them. For example, what if they get into a car accident? What about if they don't come home, or I'll be left on my own? And we've got panic, which is intense fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, which we will go into, but it's an intense response to that recognition of physical symptoms or sensations. There's no obvious cue or danger, and it just comes across suddenly. They might have more catastrophic thoughts and misinterpreting of physical sensations, such as they might notice their heart beating really fast and think, I'm going to pass out and die, I'm going to faint in front of anyone, I'm going to have a heart attack. So that's kind of some thoughts that you might have if you've got a child that's experiencing panic. Then obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, these are obsessive thoughts of bad things happening to the individual, their friend, family, peers, which leads them to do compulsive behaviours. And it's surrounding that belief that behaviours stop bad things from happening. So, for example, if I don't lock my door and check it 3 times, my parents will die. So that's an example of some thoughts that you might have with obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, we included this slide because although we'll not be focusing not too much on the development of anxiety, it is helpful to just have an understanding of it. Anxiety doesn't have one singular cause. Instead, it can develop through a combination of factors. And understanding these influences can help us understand why some children may be more vulnerable to anxiety, and more importantly, where we can make that difference. So first, genes. We know that anxiety often runs in families. Now, this doesn't mean a child is destined to have anxiety, but they may be born with a temperament that might make them more sensitive to stress or to uncertainty. And we know that genes only makes up 1/3 of the development of anxiety, so it's just to consider there is also 2/3 of that are other factors. Adverse life events or stressful or difficult experiences can also contribute to anxiety. And this might include things as moving house, bereavement, parental separation, bullying, any other significant events for your child. Now, we know that not every child who experiences some of these events develop anxiety, but we know that children who are already more vulnerable may experience these and have a bigger impact. Now, learning from example. So children learn a huge amount by watching the adults around them. Now, if they regularly see others responding to situations with fear or avoidance, they may begin to believe those situations are dangerous also. Now, this isn't about blaming anyone, it's just about recognizing that we all model behaviors and we all learn from the people around us. And it's just simply one of the ways that children do learn about the world. I'm learning from others' reactions. So children also learn how other people respond to their anxiety. So as parents, it's completely natural to want to protect your child from distress. Sometimes though, repeatedly providing that reassurance or helping them to avoid situations that make them feel uncomfortable can unintentionally reinforce the message that the situation is dangerous. Now, in the short term, it can reduce that anxiety, but in the long term, it can maintain that anxiety going forward, which we will be exploring throughout today's webinar. And then finally, coping strategies can also contribute to that development of anxiety. So we know children aren't born knowing how to manage difficult situations. They learn through experience. Now, if anxiety leads to them to avoid difficult situations, they may miss opportunities to discover that they can cope and that their fears don't come true over time. Now, when we talk about anxiety or worries in children, it's really helpful to know what's kind of happening in the brain. Now, the brain is the control center for how we think, feel, behave, and this continues to develop into early adulthood. Now, we're going to focus on two areas of the brain today. There is many more, but we'll just keep it simple. We've got the thinking part of the brain, which is that prefrontal cortex. Now, this helps with problem solving and making smart decisions. It's the part of the brain that says, let's think this through before acting and stuff like that. Now, we know that this area of the brain isn't fully developed until around 25 years of age. So children and young people can't use this part of their brain as consistently as adults can. So then we've got the reactive part of the brain, which is the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is in charge of those quick reactions, especially when you're upset or if you're scared. Now, when the reactive brain takes charge, we can move into something we call instinctive survival responses, which is the 4 Fs, which stand for fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. Now, none of these are kind of chosen behaviors, they are just automatic and they can vary. So, for example, we've got fight, which you might see behaviors in your child, such as arguing, shouting, pushing, throwing things, such as stuff like that. We've got flight, so you might notice your child running away, hiding, avoiding situations. And freeze, you might notice your child shutting down, going really quiet, daydreaming, they might be unable to speak. And then fawn. So this is where your child might people please. They're trying to keep everybody happy even when they're uncomfortable. And they can often do that by covering up that fear by smiling and laughing. So that's the 4 F responses that we experience. Now, like I've already briefly mentioned, when children and young people feel scared, stressed, overwhelmed, their brain switches into that reactive mode, which can activate a threat response. Now, this is automatic. This is something that we have no control over. In the threat response, that obviously, like I said, that reactive part of the brain takes over. So the thinking part of the brain that obviously does the problem solving, that goes completely offline. So we know that when we're in that threat response, it's not the time for lesson learning, for thinking clearly, because it's all about your child is just thinking, I need to do whatever I need to do to survive. Now, with this threat response, it can take around 20 to 60 minutes for a child to settle back to baseline, where kind of both sides of the brains are switched on. Now, we know for children that are neurodivergent or children that have experienced trauma that this 20 to 60 minutes can actually be longer. So this is just something to take into consideration if you've got a child that is experiencing some of the behaviours that we've just discussed earlier in terms of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, that they're in that threat response and that's automatic and that it's not a time for lesson learning. Now, we know the reactive part of the brain is always on the lookout for danger. Sometimes it gets it right and it reacts to the things that actually feel scary or that are dangerous, but it can also react to things that aren't dangerous. Now, when I'm in one-to-one sessions with young people, I often describe it as a little bit like a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm is designed to keep us safe and alert us of a fire, but sometimes it goes off when there's not a fire at all. And that's a little bit in terms of kind of that threat response. With it being constantly on the lookout, it sometimes does get it wrong and alerts us of things that aren't actually dangerous. Now, what might trigger this threat response? And this threat response can be set off by very normal situations. Now, we've got a list on here, but there's plenty of others. So just to go through some, we've got taking a test, going somewhere new, feeling embarrassed if a teacher asks your child a question. That's often a common one, and your child goes into that threat response because your child's brain jumps into that protective mode. And this is really important just to understand those triggers so then that you can use that to help you support your child going forward. Now, anxiety doesn't just show up as one thing. It doesn't just show up as a thought. We kind of refer it as a cycle. It can affect our thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and behaviors. And this can be a loop. It all feeds into one another. For example, if something happens and your child has a worried thought, that thought can bring on uncomfortable feelings. Then your body can react with such things as a fast heart, butterflies in their tummy, shaky legs, those types of physical sensations, which can then lead to behaviours such as avoiding, asking for reassurance, so asking if everything's going to be okay, or they might kind of shut down. Now, the tricky part of this is that each section feeds into the next. So a frightening thought can trigger that body's alarm. The alarm feels awful, so then the child does anything to escape that. Now, understanding this loop doesn't mean that your child's anxiety will disappear, but it does mean that you can start spotting where it's happening for your child and where there might be small openings to step in differently or do different things, which we will look at throughout. But first things first is kind of that maintenance of anxiety and what can kind of keep that going. So that it helps you as parents and caregivers understand what is maybe keeping the cycle going and where you can make changes. The first things is that anxious thinking style. So children often imagine the worst case scenario or they doubt their ability to cope. Their thoughts feel very real and can make everyday situations seem very frightening. Now, the more a child focuses on these thoughts, the stronger that anxiety becomes, which can obviously maintain it going forward. We also know that physical responses to anxiety can keep that going, because we know anxiety shows up in the body with things like a racing heart, butterflies, shaky legs. Now, these sensations to a child and a young person can feel very scary, so a child may avoid situations that trigger that physical response. Now, we know that that can bring that short-term relief, but it teaches the body that the situation is dangerous and can maintain that anxiety. Then safety behaviours. So sometimes children face their fears, but only if certain rules are in place. For example, if they need a parent nearby, if they're carrying a comfort item such as a favourite teddy or a favourite blanket, or if they're checking things repeatedly. Those are what we call safety behaviours. Now, these behaviours help them feel safe in the moment, but prevent them from learning that they can cope independently. Seeking reassurance is another one that can maintain that anxiety. So a child might ask a lot of questions, such as, will I be okay? Are you sure? What do you think will happen? And your child asking those questions can help them feel calmer temporarily. However, over time, relying on that reassurance can make them less confident in their own ability to manage uncertain situations. We've got avoidance. So avoiding those feared situations, people or tasks, is one of the strongest ways that anxiety is maintained. Now, each time a child avoids something that they think that is uncomfortable, for example, go to maths class, then that fear grows a bit bigger, and that chance to learn that I can do this is lost because they're not having that opportunity for learning. And then finally, other people's responses. So parents and carers naturally want to protect their children or young people from distress. And sometimes this can lead to you stepping in, doing things for them, or helping them to avoid triggers. And although this is well intended, we know that these responses can accidentally reinforce the idea that your child can't cope, which can keep that anxiety cycle going. So we're now going to look at what can you do as parents and carers to help your child with anxiety. Now, the first thing that you can do as parents and carers is try to get your child to understand that, one, anxiety rises when a child overestimates the threat and underestimates their ability to cope. So our role is to help them understand that the perceived threat or danger, such as doing a test, going somewhere new, isn't as big or scary as the thought, or that threat isn't there at all. And then secondly, getting your child to understand that if the thing that they are scared of does happen, that they will be able to cope better than they think they will be. So all about trying to give them that confidence that they are able to cope with difficult situations on their own. Now, as adults, we are designed by evolution to protect children. If children seem vulnerable to us, we will be on the lookout for signs that they are in danger, and we will step in and protect them at all costs. Now, this has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of that are the young person does not have to do anything that is scary for them. The young person feels safe. They do not have to feel the uncomfortable physical sensations that we've mentioned previously, and that they will feel happier in the moment. Now, like with anything, when there's advantages, there's also disadvantages, and the disadvantages to this are that the child and young person will never be able to overcome their fears. They will not learn that they can cope with difficult situations. They will continue to rely on you as parents and caregivers, or they will rely on others and seek that reassurance that everything's going to be okay. They will continue to avoid, and the anxiety will worsen over time. Now, I know we've just touched upon this, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail around avoidance and how that maintains the anxiety, because it is one of the strongest ways anxiety sticks around. So when a child feels worried, avoiding the situation brings that instant relief. Their body calms down, the scary feelings go away, and it seems like that safe choice. But each time they avoid the difficult situation, that fear grows a little bit bigger, because avoidance teaches the child's brain that the situation really is dangerous and that they can't cope with it. Now, this means that the child never gets the chance to learn that the feared situation is manageable, safe, or less scary than they expected. And over time, that avoidance can spread to more situations that might feel uncomfortable, making every day feel a little bit harder. So what we do need to do when it comes to avoidance is try and encourage young people to expose themselves to anxiety provoking situations and asking them to remain in it. So over time, they can learn that they can cope with situations. And during this process, a young person's brain can form that new connection, which helps them to no longer interpret the situation as dangerous or threatening. Now, for an example of that, it could be going to maths class. They might avoid that because they don't want the teacher to ask them a question because they're embarrassed they'll get it wrong or that they'll not know. Now, if they avoid that over time, that could generalize to other classes. Now, if they expose themselves to maths class and to stay in that maths class, they can learn that a teacher mightn't ask them a question. But if the teacher does ask them a question, and if they didn't know, it might not be the end of the world, or it might not be as bad as they originally thought. So that's why we say encourage your young people to go to situations or to surround themselves in situations that feel uncomfortable. Secondly, another way that you can support your child with anxiety is try and reduce that reassurance. So when children feel anxious, it's completely understandable that they look to adults for comfort, so that they ask, will I be okay? What if something happens? Because it helps them feel calmer. Now, as parents and caregivers, it's instinctive to answer, we want our children and young people to feel safe. But when reassurance becomes something a child needs in order to move forward, it can unintentionally keep that anxiety going. And reassurance works quickly, but only in that short term. So only provides comfort short term. Eventually that calm fades, the worry returns, and the child asks again. And over time, this teaches the child's brain that I can only cope if something tells me everything will be okay. This means they don't get the chance to practice managing uncertainty or build confidence in their own ability to handle tricky situations. So, what could you do? You could ask open questions instead of providing that reassurance. So instead of saying everything's going to be okay, you maybe want to try giving these questions on the screen a go, such as what are you worrying about? What is frightening you? What do you think will happen? What is the worst thing that might happen? What is it about this that is making you worried? So these questions can help young people recognize that the feared outcome may not be as bad as they think and that they have that ability to cope. It's all about not giving them the answers and getting them to do the learning for themselves. Now, if you've got a child that is saying, I don't know, if when you are asking these questions, try modeling certain behavior. So, for example, within reason, you might say, I had a really big meeting at work and I was feeling really nervous. Have you ever experienced something like that? Or I wonder if you're feeling worried about a test coming up. All about trying to use questioning as a way for you to understand their worries, but also for them to recognize what they're worrying about, because that's one of the first steps in order to kind of support your anxiety going forward. Now, when we're supporting children with worries, a lot of what helps are the things that many of you already probably do day to day, such as empathizing. It can help them recognize that they're feeling heard, that they're being understood. Again, modeling those worries. So most parents already show kind of that everyone feels worried sometimes, but it's okay to talk about it. So creating that safe space, so that you're giving them the full attention when they're talking. Also, just check your understanding. So if they're talking to you about something, repeating back to them in their words, be like, have I got that right? So it shows that you're listening. So then it goes back to that safe space, that empathizing. Then we've got naming emotions. So putting words to feelings can make them easier to manage, because we're able to do something about. Again, normalizing those feelings, so letting them know that lots of young people feel this way, can reduce that shame and can reduce that kind of isolation, because we know with anxiety, it causes a lots of different worries. So just doing some of these things on a day-to-day basis can be a huge step in supporting children and young people feel heard and normalizing those emotions, because we know from time to time as adults we all feel anxious at times, but just kind of empathizing that with children and young people, because they can feel very alone when they are worried. We're now going to go on to how else you can support your children and young people with those anxieties and worries. And one way that we do suggest is challenging some unhelpful thoughts. Now, unfortunately, we did have a video to play you today. However, because of IT, I'm not able to. But this is available on our YouTube channel if you would like to watch it later. We do have our social media links at the end, so just in case you wanted to go back to that. But in the meantime, I will talk to you through the purpose of the catch it, check it, change it technique and how it can help challenge unhelpful thoughts. So when helping children manage worries, the first step is catching that unhelpful thought. So we start off by being on the lookout for your child's unhelpful thoughts. Sometimes they say it out loud, sometimes they show up in behaviour. So it's just trying to kind of notice those. And you can do that by encouraging your children to learn how to recognise their thoughts. So going back to using those open question styles is a great way in order to catch it. Promote the sharing of thoughts, so encourage your child to tell you what they're thinking and what their worries are. Again, utilising those open questioning styles to explore deeper and for you to understand what their thoughts are. So that's just, again, asking your child, what is it you're worrying about? What do you think will happen? What do you think the worst thing about this is? So by catching this thought early, we can give children and young people a chance to understand it and eventually challenge it. So that's the first step. The first step is catching that worry. So once you've caught the unhelpful thought, the next step is to gently check it. So this part is about helping your child to look at the thought from different angles. We're not telling them that the thought is wrong, we're just helping them explore it in more detail. So you might want to ask these questions here. So is this thought a fact or an opinion? How might someone else see this? If it is true, how will you cope? What would you tell a friend if they told you this worry? What evidence do you have that this thought is true? Is there another way to look at this? So this enables your child to start seeing things from a different perspective, because we know that when we often have unhelpful thoughts, we are very focused on that. So if we ask these questions, it gives them an opportunity to explore things in a different way without dismissing their feelings. So that's the second step, checking it. And then the final step is changing it. And this part is about supporting your child to find a more balanced and helpful way of thinking. For example, a child might think, this is too hard, I want to give up. A more helpful version could be, I'll take a break and try again later. It doesn't deny the difficulty, it just gives them a way to move forward and an option. Or they might think, no one can help me right now. We can gently remind them your friends, family love and support you. So this helps them reconnect with the support they already have and remind them of that safe space and that there is support around them. And then when a child says, I'm going to feel terrible forever, we can help them remind that this feeling won't last forever, it will pass. We experience lots of different emotions in a day, and normalizing having those conversations with your child can help normalize that. So the aim isn't to replace every negative thought with a perfect positive one. It's simply to help children find a thought that feels a little bit more manageable. And over time, these small shifts can build that confidence and build resilience. Another strategy that you can do to support your child with anxieties or worries is what we call a step-by-step plan. Now, the purpose of this is gradually exposing your child to that feared situation by doing something that isn't too anxiety provoking as the first step, so they can build that confidence and then gradually working their way up. So this example here is sitting in an assembly. The first step is, for this example, sitting in the library area, then gradually working up to sitting next to the hall door with the door closed, and then gradually working way up, like we said, to being able to sit next to the class for a whole assembly. So this is something that you might just want to consider if you do have a situation where this might be helpful to just gradually work their way in rather than throwing them into the deep end and expecting them to do it. Yes. Again, another way, sometimes the best learning happens in the moments that we don't plan. So these unplanned experiments, so those everyday situations where you can try and encourage your child to face a small fear or try to get them to do something new without being something really big. So whether or not that, if you spot an opportunity, and it could be if you're out shopping and you find that your child really struggles to speak to new people, try and encourage them to ask someone that works there for, where is the milk? Yes, your child might know what aisle the milk is in, but it's all about trying to give them those unplanned experiments to promote their confidence, to give them that independence. Once they're able to do that, asking them afterwards, doing a quick check-in, how did it go? What did you learn? It helps them recognise that the thing that they worried about mightn't be as bad as they thought, or if it was, that they have that ability to cope. Again, promoting that independence. So we've got a list of things here, what you can do just to build that responsibility and to encourage them to do things for themselves. So whether that's getting their bag ready for school, doing jobs around the house, can be a really good way of getting your child to feel more confident in their own ability so that when they are faced with difficult situations, they feel like they're able to cope. So this slide is all about kind of helping children feel capable and supported when they are facing something really tricky. And that's through giving that positive encouragement and giving them the choice. So positive encouragement works best when it is very specific. So we've got examples on here of, I think you can do this really well. Let's give it a go. I can see you found it hard, but I'm really proud you tried. It's all about normalizing that and celebrating that moment. And this is another strategy that we've got, and this is what we call the problem tree. Now, the problem tree, not the problem tree, the worry tree, sorry, is a tool we can use to organise our worries and help us come up with solutions where possible. And we do this by working through the different branches, which we'll do now. So the first step of the worry tree, it starts off the same, and it's asking your child, what are they worried about? Once they've identified what they're worried about, it's then asking them, can they do anything about it? Now, for this purpose of this, we're going to look at no. So where they've answered no, they can't do anything about it, it's all about trying to let go of that worry. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but we can do things to try and let go of the worry, and that's through distraction techniques. Now, I've got some different examples on here of what your child can do, but this will vary from child to child depending on their interests. So, going for a walk, playing a video game, watching TV. Those are just some examples. If your child is having a lot of worries at school, now we know that these options aren't something that they might be able to do, but they can do some distraction techniques, such as finding 5 things for every letter of the alphabet, finding 10 things in the room that are the colour blue. It's all about trying to distract them from their thoughts in their mind to kind of what's going on around in the environment. So that's the idea for when your child has worries that they can do nothing about. So on the flip side of what you can do when there is something you can do, so when there is a worry you can do something about, you start off the same by asking yourself, what are you worried about? Can you do something about it? Yes. Okay, well now we need to problem solve. And the idea of this is you list all of the possible solutions. You then pick what is the best solution. What's the plan? Giving it a go. If you're able to, if it works out, brilliant. Hopefully you're not as worried. If it didn't work out, then going back to the solutions. So it's all about doing a step process for that problem solving. Now we've got an example here of a worry that a child might have. I will not get my homework done in time. Now the child's listed lots of different solutions here of making a timetable, set reminders, doing homework as soon as they've got it. They've then listed the pros and cons of each solution. Now, the next step for this child to do is pick one of those solutions and give it a go, and then reflecting on whether or not it worked well or not. Now, these are the final strategies that we've got for today and how to help you support your child when they feel anxious or worried. And these are some breathing techniques and some active techniques. And these are particularly helpful when your child might be noticing those physical sensations in order to try and do something as quick as possible. Now we've got finger breathing, which is place your hand outstretched in front of you, spread your fingers, and then with your other hand, place one finger at the base of your thumb and trace your finger. Breathe in, As you trace down, as you go up, as you trace down, breathe out, and repeat that process can be another one. We've also got balloon breathing, which is a similar process. You place your hand on your stomach. Imagine you have a balloon in your belly. As you breathe in through your nose, imagine you're inflating the balloon. Breathe out through your mouth and imagine you're deflating the balloon, and repeat that as many times as you need to feel calm. Then on the other side, we've got some active techniques, which is chair push-ups and palm push. This is all about relaxing the muscles, because we know sometimes when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, we get an excess of energy. The chair push-ups are sit with your feet flat on the floor, push your bottom up from the seat of the chair with your flat palms, and hold for 5 to 10 seconds and repeat if needed. With the palm push, you place your palms together, you push them firmly together and hold for 10 seconds and repeat if needed. So these are just some techniques that you may want to encourage your child or young person to do. Now, we do suggest your child and young person to practice these when they are feeling calm and familiarise themselves with it so that they can utilise it when they are in that threat response. Now, just to end today's webinar, we do have some suggested reading that we use when working one-to-one with parents, and it is very helpful, and it explores some of the strategies and techniques that we've discussed today in the webinar. And the book is called Helping Your Child with Fears and Worries, and it's a self-help guide for parents. And there's case studies in there as well. So that's just some suggested reading that we do obviously can signpost parents to that you might find helpful. But the take-home message of today is just recognising that anxiety is an important emotion that keeps us safe. We have an automatic response to perceived danger, and that you as parents and caregivers can support children and young people to feel less anxious, because you are the experts in your child and you are well placed to support them. So I hope you've all found this very helpful and can take home some strategies or techniques. Thank you very much for your time.